Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Cho. In response to tension in the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan has elevated its defense initiatives. By 2024, its defense budget soared to a record 19 billion, and the military service was extended to 1 year. Additionally, Taiwan's first indigenous submarine, Haikun, is set to be commissioned by year-end. These measures aim to bolster Taiwan's defense from weaponry enhancements to system reforms, alongside efforts to garner international support. How will Taiwan efficiently allocate its limited military resources, and what is the actual combat effectiveness of its conscription and military capabilities? Joining us today are Charles Wu, National Chengchi University, Department of Diplomacy Chair and Professor, and Courtney Donovan Smith, political analyst specializing in Taiwan. A very warm welcome to both on the show. Beginning with a global overview of military conscription durations, Taiwan implements a 1-year system. In contrast, Asian countries such as South Korea, Singapore, and China enforce conscription periods of 1.5 to 2 years. Israel even requires both male and female citizens to serve for 2 to 32 months. Meanwhile, Finland has a shorter conscription term, mandating service from 6 months up to a year. So is Taiwan's extended conscription good enough to address the threat from its aggressive neighbor China? Charles?
Yeah, I think this is very important for us to right now really think about how to training our people, our soldiers, because for the past years we have this kind of we call the 4-month training, which people joke about is kind of just you are just cleaning or preparing for military songs and then it's finished. So now we kind of restore to 1-year military training, we call the conscriptions, which I think is very useful, okay, in order to prepare for what we call the potential conflicts with the enemy. Then what we need to do in this training is not like, just prepare for military songs or killing. We need to prepare how to, for example, shooting, using this kind of, we call the anti-aircraft, anti-tanks weapons, or let the people really embolden their courages when they get to the battlefield. Mm-hmm. So I think this policy is very important for us, especially also, make the population healthier.
Mm-hmm. So Donovan, what country do you think that Taiwan can take inspiration from to more effectively bolster Taiwan's defense?
It seems most people, they speak the highest of the Israeli system. Mm-hmm. I think from what I understand, their training is really quite good. As Charles alluded to here, or Professor Wu, I'm sorry, the problem here is there's they don't really do anything, and I've talked to recent ones who did the 4 months, and they said they learned basically nothing, as you alluded to. But the Israeli one, they do apparently learn quite a bit, and I do think that it's a very good idea that they include both men and women. Obviously, they would need to build out the infrastructure to accommodate women. But that could easily be done, I think, probably within a year, and because there's no logical reason why they only conscript men and not women as well.
Donovan, you've been in Taiwan for more than 3 decades. I think you are the one who is experienced enough to comment on the phenomenon, especially the cultural phenomenon in Taiwan regarding the formality, right? A lot of requirements, just like Charles mentioned, in the military service. I was in the military for 2 years as well, and many of our staff, as I recall now, was not very useful. So, what was your observation of this formality or all kinds of requirements that's less substantive in the Taiwanese army or military, and in what way that we can improve?
Well, okay, from what I've read, because I obviously haven't gone through the military conscription here, but from what I've read and from what people have told me here, is that yes, there's a lot of formality, a lot of that's just military. But from the description, they have to go through the singing of songs and doing errands for superior officers, and and a lot of people complain about a lot of just standing around guarding stuff. So I mean, none of these things sound particularly useful. I mean, obviously errands need to be done and certain stuff does need to be guarded, but from what the government is saying, they do realize that this is a problem. The big question is how well they tackle the problem. And what I don't know is how entrenched the current culture is in the military, how flexible they'll be, or how quick they'll act. And I think that just remains to be seen. In Taichung and Chenggongling, they just brought back these gas, biological, and nuclear training to handle things like that. That sounds like a good start, although it did sound a little bit sadistic, because they send in the students with the protective gear for tear gas, take them out, and then put them back in without the protective gear. But yeah, I'm sure it is good training, though. So I'm glad to see they're addressing it, but I'd like to see the results long term.
Well, actually, though it faces different geopolitical challenges, now we're talking about the country of Finland. The duration of Finland's military service is similar to Taiwan's. So what insights can we glean from comparing the conscription strategies of these two countries? Charles, maybe you can help us to understand the Finland military system a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I'm not quite familiar with Finland. Sure. But I know they are good at, the skiing, and the skiing and shooting is they're very important and very useful technique when they fight the Winter War against Russia decades ago. However, what I want to say is, I want to jump up the bandwagon of the Donovan. Which country we need to really learn the lessons? Finland probably is one case, but I think right now the Ukraine war, okay? Because Ukraine war give us a very important idea is how can we use this kind of asymmetric warfare techniques, how to train people to really have a combat skills, how to train them to use, for example, the Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, rockets, and how they really know to fight against the giants enemies. I think it's very important lessons for all the Taiwanese citizens, also the young people, because you only let the people know what the war looks like, and let them have the willingness to fight. Then you can go to battlefield. If they don't know what is called warfare, and you just tell them, you play computer games and you can go to battlefield, no way. So all the allies in the war, also our neighbors also who want to help us, also know that only if you want to fight by yourself, then people will come to help you. So this is one thing we need to train our next generations. When you get into the military training, you better to tie your seatbelt up and train yourself very well.
So mentality and attitudes matters a lot. Again, still Finland. Donovan, what's your observation of this Finland case in terms of protect themselves from the potential Russian invasion?
Yeah, I definitely think that Taiwan should learn how to ski from them. But yeah, the Winter War, as Dr. Wu here mentioned, I think that really changed the mentality of the Finns. That was a pretty brutal war. They lost territory in the end, but they managed to win out over a vastly larger military force. So the lessons that I think that actually the biggest thing that we should learn, I completely agree about learning from Ukraine, but I think something that we also could learn from Finland, and I think this would be very important long term, is that the military service and soldiers in general are culturally more appreciated. And that, I think, is one of the major problems here in Taiwan. Also, I think that they need to look at, in countries like Finland, when they do the conscription, they also have an eye on trying to get some of them to stay on as soldiers. So I think that Taiwan would benefit if they would market themselves better, market the military better, encourage people to wear their uniforms with pride, which you see in other countries, but you don't see here. And again, make the experience of the conscription, not only so that you learn a lot, but also keep an eye on morale and build a sense of pride in the military and what they've learned, and try to make the experience as positive and morale building enough that some of them will want to stay on because they're having recruitment problems, very big recruitment problems. So I think that the mentality is more what we could learn from Finland. Although I think it would be hilarious if the soldiers here learned how to ski.
Yeah. Donovan mentioned one important point is that in the military, serving in the military is not culturally appreciated. So I wonder, Charles, how can we solve this kind of myth or problem, given the fact that Confucianism, if you will, that this is pretty much a dominant idea in Taiwan, that we even have Chinese saying that the best cut doesn't go to join military, right? So what's your take on this?
You need to provide more incentives for the people to join the military. And you start from the salaries, from the benefits, right?
Material is important.
Material is very important factors for people joining the military, right? Okay. So you need to keep increasing their salaries, or at least stabilize their benefits, their pensions. Okay, don't cut their pensions. This is one thing. You need to show them respect, or even we need to give them a more kind of benefit. For example, our military personnel, if they go shopping, whether they can show their ID and get discount. When they go to bus or go to, like, for example, zoo or theme park, whether they can get a discount. I don't think our country give the military personnel, our soldiers, enough respect or benefits to attract them, to bring them into the militaries, and let them feel proud, like Donovan mentioned. You need to feel proud when you're wearing the uniforms. And then people will say, okay, I serve in the army, I fight for the country, and I die for the country. This is one system we need to build and try to cultivate it.
Donovan, do you think that Taiwan's conscription period is still short, especially compared to other Asian counterparts, given the fact that we still face the persistent challenges by China? Do you think that Taiwan should fast track its defense preparation?
Okay, to the first question, is it long enough? I think it really depends on what the soldier's being trained for and how effectively they use the time. One of the things that I noticed in the Finland model, which you brought up, is they actually have 3 different lengths. One is just a little under 6 months, and then the longest one is around 11 months. And so it depends on what they're specializing in. So if they're specializing in something more complex, you might need more time. But I really do think most important thing, a year is a fairly long time to be able to learn stuff. It's how effectively they use that time.
If the program is intensive, 1 year is long enough.
That's what that's.
But if the program is pretty loose, even 2 years, maybe you learn little from the military.
Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing from people back in the days when it was 2 or 3 years here in Taiwan, back in the 90s, depending on the service you were in. And, at the end of it, most of the people I talked to said that, wow, we didn't really learn anything.
Right. Yeah.
That was 2 or 3 years and you're not learning anything. That's really kind of depressing.
Okay, the 2024 military strength rankings released by Global Firepower lists Taiwan in the 24th position, a slight decline of 1 place from last year. Nonetheless, Taiwan is notable for ranking 3rd worldwide in reserve military personnel. The leading military powers, according to these rankings, are the US, Russia, and China in that order. So the question is, Global Firepower has lowered the Taiwan military's rankings for the 2nd straight year. Does this trend set off alarm bells? Charles?
Yeah, I mean, when we go back to IR theories, when you increase the military powers, you go back to the realism. You try to prepare yourself to balancing against your enemies. We have a potential kind of threats coming in continuously. This is why we try to put the money into our military budget. However, I want to say that we spend a lot of money buying big chunk of weapons. M1A2, the tanks, F-16V, very expensive. Some political observers say we don't need to spend such money on this kind of big chunk of weapons because our kind of terrains is not very useful for the tanks because they will become a sitting duck. So this is why the United States right now, the Biden administration, they want us to become a porcupine, which like what I mentioned, the asymmetric military capabilities. We need to buy more portable, sustainable, small, and very quick weapons, like Stinger missiles, or we call the missile corvettes. So this is why we need to use the money wisely on the weapons and also train our soldiers, efficiently. We will keep putting more money on that, on our national defense budget for sure. Mm-hmm. But a efficient, a smart national defense policy is really we need to go forward.
Mm-hmm. This leads up to another debate is that you mentioned this Porcupine Strategy. I believe that's also is well adopted in the Finland model. But also on the other hand, people would argue that still we need to rely on this larger scale or like more huge or like long-range missiles. Taiwan still need to buy that, which we did that already in the past years. So there's a debate. Two schools might have their own theories and also reasons. So what's your take? What's your analysis of this, Donovan?
Well, I agree with Professor Wu here. I do think that the U.S. is probably correct about the Porcupine Strategy. But there's a few other things is that I do think that overall Taiwan needs to increase its defense budget. It fell under 2% of GDP under former President Ma. And Tsai Ing-wen campaigned saying that it was going to be raised to 3%. It's right now only at about 2.5%. Now, probably under William Lai, it will continue to increase, and hopefully it will. Now, you can't immediately increase it to 3% overnight. Obviously, there's only so much more money every year that they can add, but the goal really should be to be at least 3% of GDP. Now, it's worth noting that Australia just announced they're going to increase their defense spending to 2.4% of GDP, just shy of Taiwan's, and they're not as immediately threatened as Taiwan is. So I think that's an interesting statistic and something I think Taiwan should keep in mind. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think really kind of puts a lot of how Taiwan approaches this in perspective is that the Taiwan's military budget for this year is, including the special supplemental budgets, is projected to come in at $19.1 billion US dollars. But the capital expenditures only for TSMC are projected to be $28 billion to $32 billion, which is significantly larger than Taiwan's entire defense budget. So you can see where Taiwan's economy and money is really going toward. So, when a company is spending that on just capital expenditure alone is greater than your entire nation's defense spending, that really kind of gives one pause.
Mm-hmm. And also, we have to look around and see our neighboring countries, neighboring Taiwan, with their regarding their military preparation. So, especially in the aftermath of the Ukrainian-Russia war, which countries, maybe in Asia or also just over the globe, has intensified their military build-up, as you observed, Charles?
South Korea and Japan probably they are the two countries which is keeping, they need to maintain at least some certain levels of military build-ups because they have potential enemies, which is North Korea over there. And when we talk about North Korea, China is also their, their backup. So this is why we need to be aware whether this is important for South Korea, Japan, Taiwan in the future. We can do more of this kind of not only military but information, intelligence, or quasi-alliance cooperations. Okay, but I think this depends on the leaders. Okay, leaders they have their preferences. Leaders they have their party preferences. Now the Kishida and also Yoon Si-rae, they are very pro-United States. This is why we can do more cooperations. Mm-hmm. But they are going to have the election very soon. So this is we need to be aware.
Okay, Alvin.
Actually, defense budgets are rising pretty rapidly in various places around the world. Japan announced over the next few years they're going to double their defense spending to 2% of GDP from the paltry 1% that they were spending before. Obviously, Europe and the NATO countries have been pouring a lot of money into defense now that they realize that Russia is actually a serious threat. Particularly countries like Poland and the Baltic states, they're rapidly increasing their spending. With the war in Yemen and Syria, there's been increases in spending in the Middle East as well. The United States has also been steadily increasing its expenditures as well, and of course, most noticeably and importantly to us, China is rapidly increasing their defense spending. So, it seems to be, and including Australia, which I just noted. So most of the world right now is increasing their defense spending. So it's not unique to Taiwan or China. It's pretty much everywhere.
And a quick follow-up is that we already know that there's been a coordination between the Taiwanese Army and the U.S. Army. What about Taiwanese Army and other countries' army, or other countries' military sharing intelligence or even skill and personnel and whatsoever? Yeah.
Okay, Singapore actually trains troops here in Taiwan. That's something that people don't generally remark on, but actually Singaporeans do train here. They're very low key about that fact. Obviously, we've got the several hundred. They've ramped up the number of Americans here training from couple of dozen, 3 dozen or so, to a few hundred, which I think is a very important step. But I think it would be even better if we could see more. One way to possibly get around political sensitivities is to hire retired American military personnel in larger numbers for training and so on and so forth. Ideally, Taiwan would be working closer with the Japanese and the Philippines. And they have, I believe, if I remember this correctly, the Japanese now have an active military staffer there, whereas before they had retired military personnel at their de facto embassy. So I think that's a signal that there's probably more going on behind the scenes than we know about publicly. But I definitely hope that there's more communication. The other big concern, and this is something that worries me quite a bit, is interoperability. The Japanese and the Americans train together regularly. Same with the Americans and the Filipinos, and the Americans and the South Koreans. So they know how to work together, how to operate together. They have the same kinds of weapons systems and communication systems. So that means all 4 of those countries and Australia, if they get involved, all would be able to be kind of interoperable. They'd be seamlessly able to communicate with each other and coordinate their actions. How well Taiwan could integrate into that is a big concern.
Okay, I will give our audience some statistics. Beginning this year, Taiwan has initiated a conscription of over 9,100 men for a 1-year term, projected to increase to over 53,600 by 2029. So with these service numbers and about 2.31 million reservists, what level of defensive readiness can Taiwan's current military personnel attain, Donovan?
Well, okay, so as far as the numbers are concerned, because of the declining birth rate, and it really is falling off a cliff in the next few years, that is one big issue I think that Taiwan's going to need to confront. And that is, I think, I really do strongly believe that Taiwan needs to conscript women as well to bolster the numbers. And I honestly don't think that Taiwan has a choice on this. Now, as far as the quality of the reservists, I have not heard very good things about the preparedness or the training, because again, we've been talking about the training during the conscription before was more or less useless. So these reservists are probably not very well trained. I do think, and I'm glad to see that they are ramping up the number of times and the method of which the reservists go back and retrain. I think that's a good step forward. I hope they do more of this. I think another thing that also people forget, and I do think that it was Hoyoi. He actually had, I thought, a good campaign idea, and that was to have he was going to assign, I believe it was the vice president, to coordinate with the cabinet on a civil preparedness program. And because if needed, it would be, I mean, for example, Taiwan's businesses are famously nimble and act quickly. Now, if we prepared, you know, Taiwan is a leading producer of, for example, machine tools and precision machine tools. So what if these companies, if plans were sent to them for if a war started, how to convert their existing production lines to military production lines. So they are prepared in advance. Why aren't our big apartment blocks, why don't they have coordinate with the local lijiangs and prepare food and water? You know, these are the kinds of common sense steps that we could take. Kuma Academy is training people on how to respond to disasters, which has dual use with a wartime. You know, how to bandage people and these kinds of things. And another thing that a lot of people forget is that pretty much anybody can be trained to be useful during wartime. Wartime involves a lot of things like logistics, cooking, you know, dressing and bandaging, and there's 1,000,001 tasks that pretty much anybody could help with. And so more people who are trained on those things, it doesn't have to be weapons training for everyone. But there's so many things that we could be doing right now that we're not.
Okay, Charles and Donovan, thank you for the participation in the show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
In this episode, we discussed the strengthening of Taiwan's armed forces and the shift to a 1-year military service. To sufficiently deter the PLA's potential aggression, the ROC military still has room for improvements. Did you enjoy this episode? Leave us a message and subscribe to Taiwan Talks. See you soon.